Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with me. I thought I'd open up this video with another little short segment on capacitor replacements using the coil method. Seems a few people were really glad to see that. Several of you had already seen it. It goes way back. It's nothing that I invented, trust me. Anyway, when I put in this capacitor here, I told you that we bent our lead on the right, so it went this way, and then we bent our lead on the left, so it went that way, so they were facing each other. That worked well for this particular capacitor. Now, each capacitor is going to be different. When you cut those leads, you're going to have a stub. You may have a stub sticking up this way on one end, and it may be sticking down this way on the other. But that doesn't mean, you have to bend them around to where they face each other. You work the capacitor individually concerning what you've got. Here's an example. This one here, I had a stub facing upward, and this one here was slightly upward also. So what I had to do is, sort of bend the lead in a curve and put them in. I haven't soldered that in yet, but I'm getting ready to. This one right here was kind of an interesting one. This one had to go up to this lead coming down. I had to bend the coil slightly upward. See if I can get this light off of it a little bit more. It's kind of glaring. And on the other end, I also had to go up in a slight angle, see? So each capacitor is different. This one down here, I just removed this capacitor right here, this 0.003. I removed it from these two leads, this one and this one. Now these leads point straight up. Now I'm not going to bend those things around, because if I bend them around, it would be, I'd have leads stubs so close together that the capacitor wouldn't even fit between them. So how are we going to do this? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make my coil. Then I'm going to bend each end at a right angle, and I'm just going to set the coils straight down on top of the stubs. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, let's see how good my measurements were. The coil has been bent. I'll just use my hand, I guess. Let's see if it'll fit over the stubs. It fits over that one okay. Let's try the other side. Now if it doesn't fit quite right, we can bend it. Oh, that one fit just right. Look at there. Fit perfectly. Now had it not fit just right, all you would have had to done was move the stub around just a little bit on each side. Just be careful, don't overbend it. And there you go. She's all in there. And the numbers, as I said, are visible. Right, now I'll just go ahead and solder that in place. And I'll do the same thing for this one. Only, the leads will come up, instead of down, down. A number of folks have decided to pitch in and help out with this restoration. Man, that's not only is it unexpected, it's great, and I appreciate it. This is the shadow meter that came in the radio, and you'll remember that the vein down in the center is missing. We're not supposed to be able to see that hole completely like that, but there's a little flipper in there that flips back and forth. It's supposed to be in there, but it's not there. Well, one of our subscribers named Jason, he saw this, and he contacted me, and he said, John, I have one of these, and it has a flipper in it. You can have it, and I'll give it to you for free. Well, I didn't particularly, how I am. How much do you want for the postage? Or how much do you want? No, as a matter of fact, he said nothing at all. He said, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to send it to you. Use it as you want. He said, I'm pretty sure it's got a vein in there. You can maybe take it out and put it in this one. Well, the one he sent me is right here. And get the paper out of the way here. And he did not. He did not put his return address on the envelope because he didn't want me to send him any money or anything back in return. Sneaky! He's sneaky! Anyway, this one did not have a plug on the end of it, and but I want you to see that the coil, now it does have the little flipper down in there. I don't know, can you see that little, let me see, see that vertical line in the center of the hole? That's the little flipper. It's in this direction now. And once voltage is applied to it in the radio, it closes up like that. And when it does, it blocks the light coming through that hole back there. and it's missing the plug. Well, that's no problem because I have a plug right here. Now let's see how the coil checks out in this thing. If the coil checks out in this thing, I will remove this plug and splice it on to this setup here. Here we go. Almost 1400 ohms. Perfect. The coil is good. The flipper is there. All I have to do is splice the plug from the old one to the new one. So guess what? Shout out to Jason. You know, staying with this coil method of soldering, I thought I'd show you a little something extra that you may or may not use in the future. It's up to you. Let's say we had to, solder these two capacitors together end to end, like so. And most people would just go ahead and do what they call make a hook. They call it a hook method. I've never heard of that method, but it's fine. They would put a hook on the end of each one of them, maybe, and close up the hooks a little tighter, and then they would go ahead and hook the two together, and just go ahead and solder the hook together. I don't know. That's not my cup of tea right there. There is another way. Now what I've got here is a pile of insulation that I removed from a solid core 22 gauge length of wire. Let's get rid of all this stuff. I just stripped it off piece by piece off the wire, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to coil that wire around this jeweler's screwdriver, just like I did with the lead on the capacitor. So let's go ahead and get that thing coiled. Alright, the coil has been made. Now let's go. I used the entire length of wire. You don't have to make it that long, but depending on your needs, okay? Now we'll go ahead and slip that off. Now I can take this and I can cut it right in half. I can split it apart a little bit and cut it in half with a pair of dikes, and then push it back together using a pair of duck bills, just like I showed you with the capacitor lead coils. I can take them, just kind of squeeze them together a little bit. Years ago, one of our subscribers said that he knew these things as quickets, K-W-I-C-K-E-T-T-E-S, something like that. But when I was younger, it seems to me they were called quigs or quiggles, something like that. But they used to be able to get them in a tin can, a whole bunch of them in a tin, and I believe they're made out of either brass or copper wire. And it seems to me the ones that I saw years ago, we're talking about, now when I say years ago, we're talking about the beginning of the 1960s, late 1950s, maybe even earlier, before my time, I don't know. They used to come in a small tin can that was flat. And there was, there's a whole bunch of them in there. Probably the whole can probably cost 29 cents or something like that, or less. And you use them as splices. Let's say I needed to splice two wires together or two capacitors together. I don't like that so-called hook method at all. So you can do them like this. You can lay them in there side by side and bring them together so the leads stick out just a little bit about each end, about the same length, and then just solder them up. Okay? Get a little focus in here. You can solder them up just like that. And if I had two wires I wanted to splice together, I could strip back the insulation enough, stick each end in the coil, and solder it up. I could cut that coil in half and just have a couple of shorter ones to splice a couple of things together. It works great. You can use them to splice a capacitor to a resistor. You can use splice two resistors together, whatever. And the best part of it, just like the old, the coil method on the capacitor soldering, if you ever need to separate them, take them apart, all you have to do is heat it, and the two capacitor leads, or whatever you have inside that coil, will slip right out. And then if you heat it and hold it with a pair of pliers, after you've done using it, you could probably use it over again if you had to. Go ahead and take them out. And if you made one large enough, you could actually fix it up so you have 2 wires going in one end and 1 wire going in the other, or 2 going in this end and 2 going in that end, depending on the size of the barrel that you wrap the wire around. Okay, and after you use it once, you could probably heat it and shake the solder out of it to where it's open again, and probably reuse it. Really cool. I just wanted you all to see that there are alternative methods for splicing wires. That's one of them. You just got to make sure that that coil is not touching any other components, leads, or any terminals or anything under the chassis. You got to make sure it's totally away from everything. Or let me give you one more thing. I hate to keep this going on, but you could run a piece of heat shrink tubing all the way up here like this to about right this area right here. And then you could run your 2 wires together, or your 2 capacitors together, whatever you want. Hook them in there like so, solder them up, and then bring the heat shrink down, slide it back down over the top of the coil so it covers all the way at both ends, and then shrink it down after you solder your wires in. Okay, after a while you get to where you get pretty handy with these little babies. You can do all sorts of things. You can bend them at right angles and bring a wire in from the bottom. You can bring a wire in from the side. There's all sorts of little things you can do. Just a little food for thought there, folks. It's going to be at least a week before the electrolytic capacitors that I ordered came in. So let's go ahead and switch the wires over from one shadow meter to the other. Now, this is the original shadow meter here. And as you can see, the wires on the one that Jason sent are plenty long enough. I don't have to do any splicing. All I have to do is unsolder the green wires, or these red wires I guess it is, from the plug, and then unsolder the wires running up to the bulb, and then go ahead and hook them over here to the one that Jason sent. Now I do plan to remove this white wire and change it with a better one. That one's kind of messed up. But I need the center wire on this bulb right here. It's got to be removed from the plug and put into the center of this one. So let's get that done. I've got the light bulb out of the socket of the old shadow meter that we need to take the plug off of, and I've never seen this before. But look at that. The bottom of it, the glass, is all busted to pieces. The glass insulator. Isn't that something? I've never seen that. It took a while to get it out, and that's probably why. Really messed up. And there's one of the pieces of the glass insulator. Interesting, huh? Anyway, we're going to have to play with that later. Our goal right now, for the purposes of this video, is to get this plug off of here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and heat the tip of each of these pins. And once the pin gets very hot and the solder inside gets soft, I'm just going to pull out the wire from the rear with my other hand. My goodness, I hardly applied any heat to that thing, probably because the pin is so small, and that thing just slipped right out of the hole. This is going to be easier than I thought. Now I've got the 2 light bulb wires out, but before I remove the coil wires, you want to make sure that you mark the pins that they came from. I've marked them with a pencil on the side, one there and one there. Because if you look at this plug, it's not just 4 plugs evenly, or 4 pins evenly spaced apart. So you have to make sure you know which ones the coil wires go back in. So when you plug it into to the female side, everything matches up the way it's supposed to be. The next thing we have to do is get rid of that old nasty solder that's still down in the center of those pins. And that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to take the old soldering iron. I'm going to apply it to the tip of each of these things one at a time. I'm going to apply it to the first one, soften up that solder real good, and then I'm going to take this old solder extractor I have here. It's got a little thumb operated deal, a little plunger, a little suction, and then I'm just going to put it over the tip and hit the button, suck that solder right up out of there. Sometimes it takes a couple of times, sometimes even 3. You got just whatever it takes to get that old nasty solder out of there. And be careful. You know, just because this plug looks pretty hard, and it is, you can still overheat it. You can still overheat those pins. Don't go crazy on it. Get the solder out, but don't overheat them. And if you have a plastic plug, be very careful, because you know, plastic melts in a heartbeat. I'm not sure what this is made out of. Some kind of a Bakelite material, I think. Alright, the wires are back in on the other shadow meter, but I haven't soldered them in yet. I wanted to show you what I did. The ends of the insulation on these wires was really fraying bad, and it was just like sticking out all over, you know. So what I did was I put these wires in as far as they would go, which forced the insulation to go up inside those holes. That'll help keep them from fraying. I also decided to add a couple of strips of heat shrink that after they're soldered in, I'll bring the heat shrink all the way down as far as I can get it, and then go ahead and shrink it. That should help keep the fraying down quite a bit. And that takes care of that. She's all shrunk down. That'll really help prevent further fraying. The rest of this thing is, you know, just a cloth fabric is a little bit frayed on the outside, but the actual wire itself looks really good. Alright, I think what we're going to do, incidentally, it is a solder joint. We just got done soldering, so of course we're going to take our alcohol brush and we're going to clean up that plug really good and get that thing really spotless and shiny. Well, that's it. I'm going to wrap this video up here. Next time we'll work on the light bulb part of it and try to get everything into that socket and get it ready to go. And I don't know what we're going to do about this. We'll give it a good cleaning. I've got to give it a spraying, and if you can see down in that little flipper thing, it's got a round base it sits in. Looks like it's got a couple of holes at the top, a couple at the bottom, and then it just sort of mounts in there. I'm glad we have it, thanks to our buddy Jason. Well, let's wrap it up, and I need to get an email off to Greg Van Beek, thanking him once again for allowing me to be on his terrific radio show on 1420 The Breeze. The radio show, of course, is Nostalgia Radio Time, and he did a good job of carrying me, making me look halfway decent, and I appreciate that, and I know that took a lot of work. So let me go ahead and get that email fired off, and until next time, this is John.